Hi, I'm Hannah May, and I'm the Best Buy Teen Tech Center Manager here at the Innovation Hub. Today for our virtual library series, I'll be showing you how to do some different projects with paper and clay. For this project, you will need paper, newsprint, Amico velvet underglaze, any colors will work, a cup of water and paper towels for cleaning brushes. Builder's felt or tar paper are nice, or cereal boxes and thin cardboard will work great too. So when I can't get into the pottery studio to work with clay, one of the things that I like to do is work with making paper templates, or these ones that are made of tar paper and builder's paper. You can also use things that are like thin cardboard, and one benefit to this one here, which is a paper cup, is that you actually kind of have a template in itself. So I'm going to show you just a few processes for how you can make some different templates that you can put together to visualize ceramic pieces when you can't actually be building them. One of the ways that I apply this technique the most in my own studio and my own making is for making teapot spouts. So if I had a shape like this, for instance, and I wanted to put a spout on it, I might design myself a template that I could use. I'm going to do a little demonstration here just to give you an idea of how you go about doing this. You want to get a piece that you can fold in half, and you want to think about how far from the pot you want it to come out. This one's a little bit big for that form, so I'll take this smaller piece and I'll fold it in half. And the tar paper is a little bit difficult to work with when you're actually designing, so you can use a piece of paper and then draw it on here and transfer it to the tar paper after you've already figured out what shape you want. But when I'm working with something like this, I am going to look at this folded line across the top here is going to be the top of my spout. And I've obviously got this corner here that's getting in the way of me being able to press it fully against my cup here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that straight in line so that I'm getting more of the angle I want. And remember to always keep that folded line as the top of your spout. And so now when I push it against the cup, I can kind of see a little bit better what that was going to look like. I'm going to cut this bottom part and line this up one more time. And now I'm going to visualize what I want this profile to look like. So do I want it to come out and have like a curve to it, or do I want it to just be straight up and straight across? So I'll show you how you do one with a curve. You're just going to kind of cut your curve shape. And then and you just keep tweaking this until you get further and closer to what you're wanting. Now remember, where it gets narrow in here, this is going to have to be folded eventually into a three-dimensional shape. So you want to give yourself enough room there that you can do that. But this gives you a really good way to visualize and create three-dimensional spouts before you actually have to cut them out of clay. And so you can do like just lots of different ways. This is my favorite way to do a curved form like this though. So I'm going to show you how I would use this template to actually create a piece out of clay. So I'm just going to lay the tar paper down onto my slab. For teapot spouts, I sometimes go thinner with the slab. So we'll work here with this one. And this has just been rolled out with a rolling pin and some slab sticks. If you want a really precise spout, an X-Acto knife is ideal. Okay, so after you've cut around your template, you're going to just remove some of this excess clay. And because this is a little thicker than I normally would use, I can actually roll it again with a little dowel rod here. And then I'm going to cut around that one more time. And after you get used to cutting with the templates, you can even think more about the angle that you're cutting in and how it's going to attach so that you have really clean attachments. So I'm just kind of angling these two corners in. so that when they meet up, they will be the right angle. So I have this slab here, and this is gonna get quite a bit of a curve to it. So I wanna use plenty of water while I'm doing this and be compressing the clay plenty. So I'm gonna start just by doing a little bit of rib on this canvas texture back here. And I'm gonna hold it in my hand as I'm working, just so I'm continuing to support that curve that I'm creating. This clay is pretty soft, so I don't have to use a lot of water at the beginning. But if it starts to dry out, I'll add some water. And so the part that I pay the most attention to is gonna be this rim up here where it's gonna get really narrow. And I wanna make sure that that is not cracking at all because it's gotta have a really tight curve to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some water as I work this area. Make sure you don't apply water to any already existing cracks. You wanna compress those and get them out of there before. But I'm kind of thinning this as I do this. If you're familiar with making pitchers, this is similar to what I would do for like a pitcher spout, where I just kind of pull the end a little bit and taper it using water. And as I'm doing this, it's really helping to saturate this area so that it can bend even more. And eventually these two edges will just meet up. And once they get kind of close, you want to pause because we're going to do some scoring and slip in here. And I like to also compress this to this curve back here. I like to make sure I press that with my finger so that all that tight creasing that's happening is smoothed out. Then I'm going to use my scoring tool and just carefully create some scoring marks along this edge here. This is where it really helps if you have an angle cut, but you can also do it with just a straight cut. The only difference is really that you're gonna have more cleanup and more refining this at the end, the more that you don't have the cuts done so cleanly. So I'm just gonna use a brush or my finger usually to add some water to this. I typically don't add slip, I just add water, and then as my water turns into slip, I continue using it. So I have slip at the end of my projects. So I'm going to carefully press these edges together. While you're working, if you need something to support this, a sponge or like this, or even a larger sponge or foam work really nice. And I even let mine store in a cabinet like this while they're drying. I have them sitting on a sponge, not a wet one usually. And then after some of this dries up, some of this slip that's been pressed out, I can even continue refining this even more. And even though we cut this to be like exactly what we wanted to go on the pot, because you were able to design a template, especially for the piece you're making, I still have the ability to manipulate this and bend and reshape some of this as just like you would like a pinch pot as I'm trying to put it on the piece. So let's go back to a cylinder here. This would not be the piece I'd put this on. But if I had this, instead of having a straight edge here, if I wanted more of a curve, I can just do the same thing I just did, where I just work this into more of a curved shape down here. Just slowly over time. And then you can even press this whole thing. You can kind of pull back on it and adjust it until you get the perfect teapot spout. And then it's just a matter of cutting this where this edge is going to fit and attaching that to your teapot. You can also use paper for creating decoration on your clay. And so this is another thing that I like to do when I'm not actively in the studio working with clay. So I'm just gonna squeeze some out that I can paint more of a solid area. And so the next thing I'm gonna do is some hand-drawn decoration. So you can use newsprint to make your own underglaze transfers. And so I like to just use these little squeeze bottles and put all of the different underglaze colors that I have in the different squeeze bottles so that I have them available for drawing and doing decoration like this. If you're new to drawing with these bottles, one of my favorite things to do is just patterns with dots. And then once you have your different decorations done that you want to test out, you're just going to set that aside to dry. And I've actually prepared some that I can show of just some different ideas that you can do. So you've got your dots, you can do actual drawings, you can do little patterns, and you get better with these little squeeze bottle tools. But these dried ones is what we're going to work with next for applying them to some clay. Okay, so to transfer your images or your patterns onto your pieces, this is a pretty simple process. I like to do it when it's already bisqued because for me, it's just easier than catching it at the perfect time while it's drying out. And also if I mess up, I can always remove what I'm doing. So right now I'm squeezing out some of my beige underglaze onto my pattern. And I'm gonna grab a paintbrush and just paint this really nice and thick. Okay, and then you wanna catch it at the right time when it's drying out, that it's not super thick with water on the paper, but you want it to be still kind of glistening. So I'm gonna let that sit for just a second. And another thing I like to do sometimes is have like a pop of color underneath my design. So I'm just gonna do some orange here. And then I'm going to apply this little image here. And you wanna just try to lay it down to where there's not air bubbles in it. Sometimes you have to plan out what the shapes of paper are around how the piece curves. And then I use a sponge and I get it wet, and not sopping wet, but you want it to be wrung out in the water pretty well. And then I just pat this with some water. And then as you remove it, you can kind of check and see that it's doing what you want it to do. So I always do kind of more of a distressed looking pattern. I've got some like little smudges in here that maybe I wouldn't want. I can either kind of sponge those up a little bit, or because this is bisqued, if I wanted to redo this, I could just wipe the whole thing off and do it again. But I do like using this as a way to get some of the distressed patterns in there. So some of the chairs over here, you can see how there's little spots in them. You can definitely work on that and get as much of that out as you want for your own thing. So you can get this really clean looking if you want. And then for my solid pattern here, what I would do with something like this is I like to cut out shapes from my solid colors. And this one's not super thick, so we'll see how well that transfers. But usually I'll paint an entire sheet of newsprint with a solid color or black, and then I'll cut all my shapes out of it. This is like a stenciling technique. And I try to keep these shapes kind of abstract, but you could even use like a laser cutter or a Cricut to get more precise shapes if you have something you'd want to do. So on the back of this here, I'm gonna do this paper design. Same thing, I'm gonna paint this with my beige. You can pick any color, but I tend to like the way that the white or the ivory beige one look. And the reason for painting the underglaze layer on right now, because you could actually do it in the same color that you had initially done. The reason is because that actually helps it adhere to the piece. And remember, we're gonna let this dry just a little bit. And then this is the same process, but I use a little bit of a less wet sponge to just kind of press this on. The reason for less wet is just because I don't want to get the whole pot wet necessarily around it, but you can adjust based on how much your images are coming off. And a needle tool or an X-Acto knife can be really helpful in actually removing the images. And like I said, I like to do this distress technique, so you would want a thicker coat if you want that to be really harsh, fine lines. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and be sure to follow the Innovation Hub on all of our social media channels.